On August 22, 2025, at 2:15 p.m., the silence of Everglades National Park was shattered by an urgent call over the radio. 1,500,000 acres of Florida's unforgiving wilderness hold countless deadly secrets. But this one horrified even the most experienced rescuers. 32-year-old photographer Gerald Harris had been missing for exactly 12 days. Searches involving helicopters and search dogs had combed through dozens of square miles of stifling swamps to no avail, until hope of finding the tourist had dissolved into the humid air. And then they found him, alive. The man was buried up to his neck in thick black mud in the middle of a remote swamp. Yet it wasn't the fact of brutal torture that made the detectives' blood run cold. Staring at the rescuers with a vacant, dead gaze, the completely paralyzed Gerald Harris was smiling wildly and unnaturally wide. The events of this case began on August 10, 2025. Everglades Park was sweltering under an abnormal summer heat wave. 1,500,000 acres of wilderness had turned into a veritable green hell. The air temperature hovered around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity reached 100%. The air was so thick that every breath was a struggle. Under these harsh conditions, 32-year-old Gerald Harris, an experienced nature photographer, arrived on the western edge of the park near the town of Everglades City. According to records from a local rental station, at 7:15 a.m., Harris rented a 16-foot flatboat. The station's owner, 61-year-old Thomas Barker, stated during questioning that the tourist was well equipped. According to Barker, the photographer had a topographic map with a 25-mile route marked on it. The purpose of the trip was documented in the National Park Service log. Harris planned to photograph rare birds nesting in the most remote mangrove labyrinths. Before setting out, Gerald agreed on a safety protocol with the rangers. He pledged to check in via radio every 12 hours. The first 2 check-ins went without a hitch. However, on August 11th at 8:00 p.m., Harris's radio was silent. The dispatcher made 3 attempts to contact the photographer on the standard Channel 9 frequency. After 30 minutes of continuous silence on the air, at 8:30 p.m., park management officially sounded the alarm. The operation was launched with lightning speed. At 6:00 a.m. on August 12th, Collier County Police, together with park rangers and volunteers, set up an operations center on the southern border of the reserve. More than 70 specialists were enlisted in the search. 3 helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras took to the sky. Over the next 48 hours, they continuously scanned a 50-square-mile area of swampland, attempting to detect any heat source that might belong to a living person. 15 search airboats took to the water. The roar of their powerful engines shattered the silence of the thickets, as patrols combed every yard of the winding channels of the Chokoloskee River. In areas where the water gave way to solid land, 3 canine teams worked with their service dogs. However, the animals quickly lost the trail. The heat and stagnant water instantly washed away any scent of the tourist. The turning point came on the 3rd day of active searches. On August 13th at 9:30 a.m., a ranger patrol led by Officer David Miller discovered Gerald's boat. The boat was drifting aimlessly 5 miles off the coast of Goodland Bay, snagged on the roots of a mangrove tree in a narrow channel. The 11-foot anchor remained on board, and the engine was turned off, although there were still 10 gallons of gasoline left in the tank. At 2:15 p.m., the flatboat was towed to the base, where investigators from the crime lab began their examination. Harris's hiking backpack lay on the dry bottom of the boat. Next to it was photographic equipment, securely packed in 2 cases. 40 pounds of provisions, 20 gallons of drinking water, and a charged radio remained in their places. A wallet containing $100 and a driver's license lay untouched in an outside pocket. Forensic investigators thoroughly swabbed every inch of the boat's surface with luminol, but the test results came back negative. The examination revealed no signs of a struggle, no microscopic blood droplets, no footprints from outsiders, and no evidence of an alligator attack. Everything looked as if the owner had simply stepped overboard. However, the nearest stretch of land was 2 miles away, and the swamp was 8 feet deep. The 32-year-old photographer seemed to have vanished into the air of the Everglades, leaving no trace behind. The search around the site where the boat was found continued, but tropical downpours and dangerous vegetation thwarted the police's efforts. The official version of the investigation leaned toward an accident. However, at 7:45 p.m. on August 15th, a specialist examining the boat's onboard navigation system discovered an alarming anomaly. According to the device's digital log, 1 hour before communication was lost, the vessel deviated from its route by 10 miles and performed a series of erratic maneuvers, after which an unknown person violently ripped the tracker's power cable from the control panel. August 22, 2025. Exactly 12 days had passed since the mysterious disappearance of 32-year-old Gerald Harris. Hope of finding the tourist alive was fading with every passing hour, turning into a grim accident statistic. After carefully analyzing the direction of the water currents, analysts at the search headquarters decided to shift the focus of the operation 15 miles south of where the empty boat had been found. Now, radars, drones, and personnel were fully concentrated near the marshy borders of Ponce de Leon Bay. It was here that the area lay which local cartographers had marked as Silver Slough. It was a deep, treacherous, and nearly impassable swamp. The water here stagnated for weeks, taking on a dark, rusty hue, while the thick roots of mangrove trees intertwined into a dense, suffocating trap just above the damp surface. Visibility in this quadrant did not exceed 10 feet due to thick, toxic fumes and dense tropical vegetation. The air temperature dropped only late at night, but during the day, it relentlessly soared back to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, turning any stay there into physical torture. According to official reports from the National Park Service, at 1:45 p.m., a group of 3 ecologists from the State Department of Environmental Protection cautiously entered the Silver Slough area. Their routine task was to collect samples of stagnant water for laboratory analysis of hazardous toxin levels. At 2:10 p.m., the senior ecologist, 45-year-old Martin Brody, veered 50 yards off the main watercourse. He slowly made his way through tall thickets of giant ferns and the rotting trunks of fallen trees. According to his subsequent documented testimony, the researcher's attention was drawn to an unnatural, perfectly round mud crater in the center of a small, dry clearing. Upon approaching within 3 feet, Brody saw an object that he initially mistook for a rock bleached by the sun or a split, dead stump. However, within a moment, the ecologist realized the chilling truth. A human head was visible amid the pitch-black, sticky mud. It was the missing Gerald Harris. The man had been buried in the quagmire up to his neck, as if someone had deliberately placed him there. At 2:15 p.m., a panicked, intermittent call over a portable radio shattered the silence. The digital recordings of the dispatch service's radio intercepts preserved Brody's exact words. According to a witness, he was shouting as he reported that he had found the missing hiker, demanded an immediate medical evacuation, and kept repeating that the man was deep underground. Exactly 18 minutes later, the first patrol of experienced rangers arrived at the specified coordinates in a powerful air glider. The rescue operation instantly descended into chaos and a physical struggle. The mud in the crater turned out to be so compacted, sticky, and heavy that any attempt to pull the victim out by gently grasping his shoulders caused the mud to act like a super-powerful vacuum vise, dragging the battered body even deeper with every slightest tug. The Rangers had to dig Harris out entirely by hand. They used small metal entrenching tools, and when those became hopelessly stuck in the ground, they desperately dug through the mud with their bare hands, tearing at their skin. The officers worked waist-deep in murky water, risking at any moment that they themselves would sink beneath the surface of the unstable quagmire. The mud had a sharp, nauseating smell of methane and centuries-old decay. According to one of the rescuers, the soil around the tourist's neck had been packed so tightly and skillfully that it resembled wet concrete. This could not physically have been the result of natural soil subsidence or an accidental fall. Someone had deliberately and painstakingly buried a living person, leaving him no chance of survival. However, the most chilling aspect of this horrific discovery was not the extreme conditions or the difficulty of the rescue, but Harris's current condition. The 32-year-old man, defying all laws of biology, was still alive. A paramedic from the rescue team, after carefully attaching sensors to his dirt-covered neck, detected an extremely weak, thread-like pulse, no more than 40 beats per minute, and barely perceptible, extremely shallow breathing. But his face made even the most hardened Rangers shudder and instantly look away. Gerald's face was contorted into an extremely wide, maniacal, and utterly unnatural smile. The muscles in his cheeks were strained to the absolute limit, lifting the corners of his lips unnaturally high and baring his parched teeth in a grotesque, deathly grin. This grimace had absolutely nothing to do with human joy, shock, or even hysteria. The man did not scream in pain, did not beg for help as he was dug out, and did not make a single sound. What's more, he didn't even blink. His wide-open eyes, bloodshot from burst blood vessels, showed no reaction to the rescuer's commotion, the bright light of the tactical flashlights, or the loud commands all around him. His gaze was fixed rigidly on a single invisible point in space, piercing the dense thickets of the Everglades with its emptiness. Gerald's mind seemed to have long since abandoned this mangled body, clamped in the vise of the black earth, leaving behind only a terrifying, frozen mask. When the rescuers finally carefully freed his chest and reached his arms, an officer accidentally washed away a thick layer of mud from his right forearm. The entire team froze instantly. Right above a vein, amid the mud and deep sunburns, a fresh, dark mark from a thick medical needle stood out clearly. Dear viewers, before we continue delving into this chilling case, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and like this video. These simple actions are critically important because YouTube's algorithms work in such a way that your activity helps promote the video, allowing a much larger number of people to see this story. Thank you to each and every one of you. And now let's return to the dark events in the Everglades. On August 22, 2025, at 4:40 p.m., the silence over the city of Miami was shattered by the roar of rotors. An emergency medical evacuation helicopter made a rapid landing on the helipad at Jackson Hospital. On board was Gerald Harris. The patient, covered in a thick layer of black mud, was immediately transferred to a resuscitation room. Security was reinforced by state police patrols as the circumstances pointed to a criminal act. According to the records, at 5:15 p.m., the team of specialists completed their examination. The chief intensivist noted in the patient's chart an extreme degree of physical exhaustion and critical dehydration. The skin on the tourist's face and neck, which had not been protected by the mud, was covered with massive blisters. The doctors diagnosed second-degree sunburn, resulting from prolonged exposure to the direct rays of the Florida sun without the ability to change body position. However, a paralyzing shock awaited the homicide detectives a short time later. At 8:30 p.m., the results of the toxicological analysis of Harris's blood arrived from the forensic laboratory. A massive dose of scopolamine was detected in the patient's plasma, which an unknown chemist had skillfully mixed with potent synthetic hallucinogens. This chemical cocktail scientifically explained both the complete catatonic paralysis of the body and that very same eerie, frozen smile on his face, which had terrified the rescuers to the point of death. As noted in the toxicologist's report, the administered substances completely blocked the motor functions of the nervous system. They turned the 32-year-old man's body into a rigid, completely immobile shell. But the worst part was that scopolamine, in this combination, did not render the victim unconscious. The toxin left Gerald's brain in a state of lucid, albeit constantly hallucinatory, consciousness. According to the experts' findings, throughout those days, the man was fully aware of everything that was happening to him. He felt the scorching sun burning his skin, the bites of insects, unbearable thirst, and the slow fading of his body. But he could not move a single muscle, could not look away, could not even blink, remaining a silent prisoner within his own living flesh. To the investigators from the criminal division, everything became immediately clear. This was no longer being treated as a tragic accident or the result of consuming unknown plants. The investigative report dated August 23rd documents a ruthless crime. Unknown individuals deliberately and with clear intent administered paralyzing drugs to the tourist. They had arrived in advance at a remote section of the park, carefully dug a deep hole in the swamp, neatly placed the paralyzed but conscious man inside, and packed the black mud incredibly tightly around his body. The perpetrators left him to die slowly, condemning him to torture. At 10:45 p.m., the case status was officially changed. It was now classified as first-degree attempted murder with exceptional cruelty. The detectives realized they were dealing with cold-blooded sadists. Only one question remained. What exactly could the nature photographer have done to deserve such a horrific punishment? The clue lay in his actions before his disappearance. At 8:00 a.m. the next day, the investigation team received Harris's bank statements, and a single transaction pointed them to the dark place where this nightmare began. On August 23, 2025, at 8:30 a.m., the police department's investigative team began a minute-by-minute reconstruction of Gerald Harris's route. It was critically important for the detectives to understand exactly what the photographer had been doing during the 7 days leading up to his rental of that ill-fated flatboat. A request to the financial institutions yielded the first substantial results. At 10:15 a.m., investigators received detailed credit card statements for the victim. Most of the transactions were entirely routine: the purchase of 15 gallons of gas, payment for a room at a roadside motel, and bills from outdoor gear stores. However, one transaction caught the analysts' attention. On August 9, 2025, at 8:45 p.m., $42.50 was withdrawn from Harris's card. The transaction took place at a rundown local tavern called the Old Swamp Post, located on a remote and poorly lit stretch of the infamous Tamiami Trail, 40 miles from the nearest major town. That same day, August 23rd, at 2:00 p.m. sharp, two detectives arrived at the address. The Old Swamp Post turned out to be a gloomy, single-story building resting on thick wooden stilts right above the stagnant swamp water. The air around it smelled of rot and spilled cheap alcohol, and a broken neon sign hummed monotonously above the entrance. Inside, a heavy semi-darkness reigned. The investigators immediately noticed the farthest corner table, hidden behind a massive oak partition. The local regulars had long called this spot the blind spot. The lights above this table were never turned on, and it offered a perfect view of the only entrance door, while the guests themselves remained in complete shadow. It was in this eerie, blind spot, as the detectives discovered, that the paths of the tourist and his future tormentors crossed. Investigators began a detailed interrogation of the staff. 58-year-old bartender Thomas Woods and 2 regular patrons provided testimony that made it possible to reconstruct the events of that fateful evening down to the minute. According to the interrogation transcripts, on August 9th at 7:40 p.m., Gerald Harris entered the tavern, sat down at a small table by the window, and ordered dinner. At around 8:30 p.m., the photographer took his professional digital camera out of his waterproof backpack. According to witnesses, the man was simply checking the lens settings and calibrating the ISO ahead of tomorrow's challenging expedition. He raised the bulky camera and accidentally took a series of rapid shots toward the blind spot. Witnesses unanimously stated that the camera's bright flash illuminated, for a split second, a group of 4 aggressive-looking men who had previously been sitting quietly in the semi-darkness. According to the bartender, the group was led by Roy Clinton, a 45-year-old local resident with an extremely dangerous reputation. The man was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 200 pounds. The police database later confirmed the witnesses' statements. Clinton had a long criminal history and had previously been convicted twice for large-scale smuggling, having spent exactly 10 years in federal prison. When the light from Harris's flash hit the criminal's eyes, the atmosphere in the tavern instantly turned icy. According to the reconstruction of events, at 8:32 p.m., Roy Clinton silently rose from his table in the blind spot and strode decisively toward the tourist. The tavern patrons heard the local tough guy demand, in an ultimatum-like and openly hostile tone, that Harris hand over the memory card from his camera. A witness named Mark, who was sitting 15 feet away, testified that Clinton threatened Harris with physical violence unless he destroyed all the digital photos immediately. However, the 32-year-old tourist made his biggest and, unfortunately, fatal mistake. He dismissed these words as the usual drunken threats of an aggressive small-town hick. According to the bartender, Harris calmly but firmly refused to hand over the expensive equipment or delete the files. Realizing that the conflict could escalate into a fight, at 8:45 p.m., Harris quickly paid for his dinner with a credit card. He carefully packed his equipment back into his backpack and, without looking back, left the tavern at exactly 8:50 p.m. Bartender Woods noted in his testimony that Clinton did not run after the tourist into the dark street. Instead, the criminal silently returned to his corner, made a single brief phone call, and, along with his accomplices, hurriedly left the establishment at 9 o'clock. None of those present in the bar at that moment even suspected that this seemingly minor incident had just sealed one of the most brutal death sentences in the history of the entire state for the photographer. Analyzing the collected testimony, the detectives realized the key point. Roy Clinton's rage was far from being caused by mere paranoia or hostility toward tourists. This thin thread unexpectedly led investigators to a massive, well-organized criminal group that had been operating with impunity for decades under the cover of the impenetrable mangrove thickets of the Everglades. The group operated so cautiously and seamlessly that for many years it remained completely undetected by even the most experienced federal agents. But what exactly could Gerald's camera have captured in that split second while the flash went off? What was so incredibly dangerous happening in the darkness of the blind spot that the criminals were willing to carry out a meticulously planned, sadistic murder just for the sake of a single accidental photograph? On August 24th, 2025, at 6:00 a.m., the Florida State Police Operations Headquarters, in conjunction with a tactical unit of federal agents, launched a large-scale covert operation. Having obtained irrefutable testimony from a local tavern, detectives immediately established round-the-clock covert surveillance of Roy Clinton and every member of his inner circle. Given the extreme nature of the terrain, the use of standard ground patrols was deemed deadly dangerous and tactically ineffective. Therefore, at 8:30 a.m., 3 state-of-the-art reconnaissance drones took off from a remote military airfield into the skies over the Everglades. They hovered silently at an operational altitude of 5,000 feet, using powerful optical lenses and thermal infrared scanners to continuously track even the slightest movement of the suspects. Over the next 10 days, until September 3, 2025, these cameras recorded footage that would later form the basis for one of the most high-profile criminal investigations of the decade. On September 1st, at 10:45 p.m., drone operators detected unusual activity. According to the surveillance log, 2 high-speed boats belonging to Clinton's associates suddenly deviated from their usual routes. They sped deep into the most impassable, pitch-black section of the mangrove swamps, located exactly 30 miles from the nearest paved highway. It was a complete blind spot on geographical maps, a place where ranger patrol boats had not ventured for over 20 years due to critically low water levels. At 2:15 a.m., the cameras transmitted a thermal image of a massive structure, known among criminals as Blackwater Dock, to the monitors at federal headquarters. It turned out to be a perfectly fortified stronghold on the water, skillfully concealed beneath a dense natural canopy of living mangrove trees and heavy military camouflage netting. The scale of this shadowy empire in the very heart of the national park was staggering. The illegally seized territory, covering nearly 3 acres, housed 5 massive camouflaged hangars. According to analytical reports dated September 2nd, these facilities, each over 100 feet long, were used to store hundreds of pounds of hard drugs. Surveillance confirmed that this cargo was regularly smuggled from South America on specially modified high-speed boats with an extremely shallow draft. Such vessels glided through the shallow waters of the marshes at a speed of 80 miles per hour. In the adjacent wing of Blackwater Dock, an underground laboratory operated non-stop. Every night, from midnight to 4 a.m. sharp, infrared scanners detected powerful heat signatures there, a sure sign of large-scale packaging and chemical synthesis of synthetic drugs. However, drug trafficking was far from the syndicate's only source of income. In the eastern sector of the water fortress, drones detected dozens of long, covered tanks. On September 3rd at 10 a.m., investigators from the Department of Environmental Protection uncovered a chilling truth. It was a massive breeding facility for the smuggling of extremely rare reptile species. Thousands of exotic snakes, rare alligators, and lizards were being illegally held there for sale on the black market. The value of just one shipment of animals reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. Blackwater Dock was a completely self-sufficient, multi-million-dollar operation. That same day, September 3rd, at 7:30 p.m., an emergency meeting was held at headquarters. Digital facial recognition specialists, after analyzing the video footage, identified a person who regularly visited Roy Clinton at the base. The man turned out to be a high-ranking emissary of a ruthless South American cartel. It was at that very moment that the detectives realized with absolute clarity what 32-year-old Gerald Harris had accidentally photographed on August 9th at 8:32 p.m. in the dim light of the tavern. His professional camera had captured more than just the drunken faces of the smugglers. The sensitive lens had caught the moment when hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash were handed over from a cartel representative to local logistics operatives. Without realizing it, an ordinary tourist had come into possession of deadly, incriminating evidence. These photographs were the only direct proof of a connection between the Clinton group and the international cartel. evidence that could destroy a multi-million-dollar criminal network in a matter of days. For Roy Clinton, the tourist's murder had become a matter of life and death. The investigators now had a solid motive and the exact location of the criminals. But before giving the order to storm the impregnable Blackwater dock base, the detectives had to uncover one final, chilling detail. What exactly happened to the photographer immediately after his brutal abduction? And how was his mind plunged into that chemical nightmare in the middle of the dead marsh of Silver Slough? On September 4th, 2025, at 9:15 a.m., a medical breakthrough critical to the investigation took place in an isolated intensive care unit at Jackson Memorial Hospital. A team of experienced psychiatrists, led by Dr. Sarah Jenkins, managed, through an extremely aggressive pharmacological detoxification regimen, to partially bring Gerald Harris out of his deep catatonic stupor. Over the next 72 hours, detectives from the Homicide Division meticulously recorded his fragmented testimony, which was filled with sheer animalistic terror. Based on these audio recordings, as well as the irrefutable physical evidence collected by forensic investigators at the crime scene, experts were able to reconstruct the minute-by-minute chronology of events on that fateful day. It was a detailed dissection of a perfect torture, calculated with cold-blooded, sadistic precision. According to the criminal case file, the hunt for the tourist began while he was still on the safe shore. On August 10th at 7:30 a.m., while Harris was filling out rental paperwork at the station in Everglades City, one of Roy Clinton's accomplices discreetly attached a miniature magnetic radio beacon to the bottom of the 16-foot flatboat. Over the next 30 hours, the criminals methodically and patiently tracked the photographer. They deliberately kept a distance of 5 miles so as not to attract his attention with the loud noise of their engine. On August 11th, at approximately 3:00 p.m., Harris entered a narrow channel, completely cut off from the outside world and tightly surrounded by a high wall of mangrove trees. According to the victim's testimony, at 3:20 p.m., the dead silence of the marshes was suddenly shattered by the deafening roar of an approaching high-powered airboat. Without slowing down, the smuggler's vessel rammed Gerald's flatboat hard, boarding it. The official interrogation report, dated September 6th, states that there were 3 attackers. They acted swiftly, professionally, and without saying a word. Harris was instantly knocked to the wet deck. 2 men began methodically beating him with heavy metal pipes. A forensic medical examination of the fractures confirmed that the criminals struck exclusively at the ribs and soft tissues of the limbs to ensure they would break any physical resistance, but not kill the victim immediately. At 3:45 p.m., Roy Clinton found the photographer's waterproof backpack. In full view of the bleeding tourist, they smashed his professional camera with massive blows from a piece of scrap iron. Their next step was to physically destroy all available memory cards. The only evidence of their direct connection to the South American cartel was reduced to plastic dust, scattered over the swamp water. However, for the crime boss, it was not enough simply to eliminate an accidental witness and destroy the digital incriminating evidence. According to a detailed psychological profile compiled by FBI analysts, the gang leader decided to stage an execution that would serve as the most striking warning possible. This act was intended to serve as an absolute warning to anyone who dared to cross his path. According to Gerald's testimony, at 4:10 p.m., Roy Clinton approached him. In his hand, the criminal held a large medical syringe with a thick needle. Without any emotion, the criminal roughly pinned the victim's head down with his knee and personally injected a massive dose of a synthetic scopolamine-based neurotoxin deep into the tourist's jugular vein. The drug took effect within moments, completely blocking nerve impulses to the muscles. As the 32-year-old man's consciousness rapidly plunged into a dark chemical nightmare, he completely lost the ability to move. At 5:30 p.m., the gangsters loaded his completely paralyzed body onto their air glider and transported him 10 miles from the abandoned flatboat to the infamous Silver Slough Swamp. The victim heard every rumble of the engine and felt every touch from his tormentors, while in a state of utter helplessness and hallucinatory terror. The criminals dug a deep pit in the viscous swamp, about 5 feet deep. At 6:15 p.m., they placed the living man upright inside it. According to forensic soil analysis, the criminals spent over an hour packing the heavy, wet mud as tightly as possible around his body. They left only his head exposed, clamped by the earth as if in a concrete vice. The killers knew exactly how the drug they had administered worked. The paralyzed victim would be unable to call for help, unable to shoo away insects, and unable even to close his eyes when the scorching Florida sun began to mercilessly burn his cornea. The bizarre, frozen smile that stretched across Harris's face due to a spasm of his facial nerves became a chilling side effect of the toxin. It turned the victim's final days into a perverse, silent mockery at the hands of his executioners. At 7:40 p.m., the criminals started the air glider's engine and left Silver Slough for good. Realizing the full extent of the group's sadism and the degree of its organization, the homicide detectives understood that they could delay no longer. A warrant for a forced raid on the impregnable Blackwater dock base was urgently signed by a federal judge on September 14th at 11:55 p.m. The countdown began. Only one troubling question remained. Would the tactical units manage to catch the cartel off guard under the cover of thick morning fog? Or had the far-sighted Roy Clinton already set his own, no less bloody trap for the special forces amid the endless swamps of the Everglades? September 15th, 2025. This date has gone down in the history of Florida criminal justice as the day one of the most complex and large-scale tactical operations was carried out in the impassable swamps of the Everglades. Having gathered irrefutable evidence through meticulous drone reconnaissance and detailed witness testimony, investigators received the green light from a federal judge. Combined forces of state police, FBI tactical unit operatives, and a special operations squad launched a coordinated raid on the Blackwater dock base. Preparations for the raid were documented in criminal reports with chronological precision. At 2:30 a.m., at a temporary command post set up 15 miles from the target, a final briefing was held for 100 operatives. The operation began at exactly 5 o'clock a.m. Weather conditions played into the law enforcement officers' hands. An incredibly thick, impenetrable morning fog hung over the marshes, providing ideal natural cover. Visibility in this area dropped to a critical 10 feet, and the air temperature fell to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the tactical plan, the assault teams split into 3 flanks. They approached the target silently in 20 special black tactical kayaks and 5 military flat-bottomed boats with shallow drafts. All engines had been shut off in advance, and the use of any light sources, even miniature infrared flashlights, was strictly prohibited. The troops advanced using only paddles and night vision devices. Their operations were coordinated from the air by 2 National Security Agency drones. Flying at an altitude of 3,000 feet, they continuously transmitted thermal imagery to the command post, clearly detecting every heat source inside the base's wooden barracks. At 5:40 a.m., the FBI's advance team quietly disembarked onto the slippery wooden pier at Blackwater Dock. The silence was broken only by the soft lapping of the water and the barely audible breathing of the armed agents. But at 5:45, the absolute silence was shattered by the first sharp gunshot. According to the official testimony of the assault team commander, one of the cartel guards patrolling the perimeter heard the creaking of planks, noticed movement in the fog, and opened chaotic fire with an automatic rifle. This served as the signal to launch a full-scale assault. The raid instantly escalated into a fierce, deadly firefight at extremely close range. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, the crackling of wood splintered by bullets, and screams. The criminals, caught off guard right in their beds, bolted out of the hangars in their underwear, trying to return fire as they ran. Their sole objective was to break through to the moored high-speed air gliders. The smugglers' plan was to disappear into the thick fog at a speed of 60 miles per hour. However, federal agents had anticipated this scenario as early as the planning stage of the operation. As soon as the criminals jumped into the boats and tried to start the engines, muffled shots rang out from large-caliber sniper rifles. Special Forces snipers, who had taken up camouflaged positions in advance in tall mangrove trees 200 yards from the base, disabled the engines of every single boat with precise shots from armor-piercing rounds. The engines began to smoke and fell silent forever, instantly cutting off all possible water escape routes for the smugglers. Realizing the utter hopelessness of his situation, the gang's leader, Roy Clinton, made a desperate decision. According to the arrest report, at 6:15 a.m., he smashed the back window of his bungalow and attempted to flee on foot through the dense mangrove thicket. The 220-pound man groped his way blindly through rotting roots and sharp branches, trying to hide from the police thermal imaging cameras under the dense canopy of vegetation. But a cruel twist of fate caught up with him incredibly quickly. Clinton, who had personally condemned the tourist to a slow death in the quicksand, now felt the wrath of the swamps himself. After running less than 100 yards from the edge of the pier, the crime boss suddenly sank. He was stuck up to his waist in extremely viscous black mud, which instantly immobilized him. Each subsequent panicked attempt to break free only dragged him deeper into the cold, foul-smelling mire, leaving him no chance of escape. At 6:30 a.m., a tactical team with tactical flashlights illuminated the area, tightly surrounding the trap site. Clinton offered no further resistance. Realizing that the swamp would not let him go, he slowly raised his hands, caked in black mud, and surrendered to the federal agents. He was personally pulled out of the quagmire using sturdy tactical ropes. The smugglers' criminal base, which had operated with impunity for years, was completely dismantled in a matter of hours. During a subsequent search at 7 o'clock a.m., investigators seized more than $8 million worth of drugs, an arsenal of state-of-the-art automatic weapons, and hundreds of pages of the cartel's rough accounting records. At 7:45 a.m., Roy Clinton, covered head to toe in sticky Florida mud, was led out onto the main pier for transport to a temporary detention center. The operation ended in an unquestionable triumph of justice. But as one of the detectives tightened the plastic ties around the leader's wrists, he suddenly raised his gaze slowly. A wide, deranged, and utterly vacant smile spread across his face, a chilling replica of the very same grimace that the neurotoxin had forever etched onto the face of his mutilated victim. And at that moment, the investigator felt an icy chill run down his spine, as he realized that the most terrifying legacy of this case could not be destroyed by any raid. On November 3rd, 2025, at 9 o'clock in the morning, one of the most high-profile criminal trials in the history of the state of Florida began in the Miami Federal Courthouse. The case against Roy Clinton and his criminal syndicate comprised over 10,000 pages of evidence. Unprecedented security measures turned the courtroom into a veritable fortress. 40 armed federal marshals patrolled the building, and every visitor underwent 3 levels of screening. The prosecution charged Clinton and his 4 closest associates with 27 counts. The main charges included first-degree attempted murder with extreme cruelty, kidnapping involving chemical torture, and organizing a large-scale drug cartel within the Everglades National Park. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution methodically and ruthlessly dismantled any attempts by the defense to exonerate the defendants. Detectives presented the court with irrefutable evidence: video footage from surveillance drones, financial records of transactions with a South American cartel totaling over $8 million, and detailed confessions from lower-ranking members of the group. But the most compelling evidence was the official results of the victim's forensic medical examination and a miniature radio beacon recovered from the bottom of the boat, on the surface of which forensic experts found an incredibly clear fingerprint of Roy Clinton's right thumb. On November 20th, 2025, at 2:15 p.m., the federal judge read the final verdict. Absolute silence reigned in the courtroom, broken only by the clicking of the camera shutters of the journalists present. Roy Clinton and his 4 accomplices were officially found guilty on all counts of the severe indictment, without exception. The court's sentence left no room for alternative: life imprisonment in a federal maximum security prison with no possibility of parole. According to the court transcript, Clinton showed no emotion during the sentencing. He merely stared coldly toward the victim's bench. It was there, closely escorted by 2 psychiatrists and a police officer, that 32-year-old Gerald Harris sat. He survived, but the true cost of that survival turned out to be horrific. According to an excerpt from his medical records, during his stay in the intensive care unit, he lost 35 pounds. Those 12 endless days, spent up to his neck in black, foul-smelling mud under the scorching sun while awaiting a slow death, left an indelible scar on his mind and body. His physical wounds, severe sunburns and bacterial infections, healed after 4 months of intensive care. But the effects of the synthetic chemicals proved irreversible for his body. In January 2026, Harris made the firm decision to leave Florida for good. He sold his property and moved 2,000 miles away from the deadly swamps to the arid, waterless desert of Arizona. According to his treating therapist, Gerald deliberately chose an isolated house, located 150 miles from the nearest body of water. He never touched a camera lens again in his life, having permanently abandoned his career as a naturalist. Moreover, the man was terrified of going near any forests or park areas, suffering from a severe form of post-traumatic stress disorder and agoraphobia. However, the true horror lay much deeper, within his own nervous system. Neurological examinations conducted in March 2026 revealed permanent damage to his neural connections. A horse dose of scopolamine, skillfully mixed with hallucinogens, had irreversibly altered the structure of his brain. Now, at the slightest hint of stress, anxiety, or sudden fright, the 32-year-old man completely loses control of his facial muscles. A powerful, uncontrollable spasm instantly tightens his cheeks, and that same eerie, emotionless smile spreads across his face once more. It has become his curse, an eternal imprint of the mystery that the Everglades nearly concealed. The high-profile criminal case had been officially closed, and the criminals were behind bars. However, on April 12, 2026, at 10:30 p.m., the Miami Police Department received a top-secret report from the FBI's toxicology laboratory. Analysts who continued to examine drug residues from the dismantled smuggler's base reached a shocking conclusion. The chemical formula of the neurotoxin was so complex and unique that it could only have been synthesized by a chemist of the highest caliber. But upon checking all those arrested at the base, not a single person among them had even a basic medical education. The creator of this chemical nightmare was never arrested. And the most terrifying part was that exactly 3 days before this report was compiled, deep in the impassable swamps of the neighboring state of Louisiana, Rangers found a local tourist who had been reported missing. He was buried up to his neck in black mud, and an unnaturally wide, deranged, and utterly lifeless smile was forever frozen on his face.